Into the breach. The world of indie game development is, by necessity, more limited in what they can do than AAA developers. The best of them turn the limitations into inspiration. The same team that had a huge hit with FTL returned to give us an extremely tight almost puzzler where you command giant robots to protect the Earth from alien invasion. Its execution is not bleeding edge, but it can still give you a serious case of, just one more turn. Space Hulk. Tactics. Games Workshop deserves an absurd amount of praise for the number of digital translations of games they have allowed over the years. While the quality has been inconsistent, there have been so many that good ones are inevitable. T is one of the best digital versions of Space Hulk to date. The graphics are clean and clear, the interface is relatively intuitive, and it just works. If there's a drawback, it's the RNG, clunky space marine movement, and the moments of unfairness that stem from that. Valkyria Chronicles 4. The Xbox is an RPG-heavy platform, so it's not surprising that RPGs which lean heavily on strategic mechanics, or strategy games which borrow heavily from RPG mechanics, would be well represented. VC4 is one of the classic representatives of the hybrid. The turn-based tactical combat is a tense affair as you trade off mobility for actually taking a shot. If you like a heaping helping of strategy in your story or vice versa, you might want to give this title a test drive. Kingdom. 2 Crowns. Console only. The Kingdom games have been around for a couple of years, combining resource management with linear tower defense gameplay, except instead of playing a disembodied god you're literally down in the mud racing back and forth on your mount giving orders. 2 Crowns has the surprising twist of multiplayer co-op along with an entirely new Japan-themed environment in which to strive against the darkness. Pandemic. The board game. Console only. If you've played board games in the last several years, odds are that you have played Pandemic, and know it's not about opposing the other people at the table but about figuring out how best to cooperate with them to take out the plague which is destroying humanity. Balancing your limited resources and your limited area of effect, since you can't be everywhere at once, is the real meat of the game. It's tense, it's challenging, and it's on the Xbox. Stellaris. Console edition. Console only. If you're an avid strategy game fan, you'll probably have heard on the grapevine that Stellaris is an absolute belter. Create your own species along with its government, expand from your homeworld, conquer, trade, and connive in order to be the most powerful space empire in the galaxy, and along the way, try not to get killed by older, more powerful things from beyond the rim. Battlestar Galactica. Deadlock. This recommendation can vary depending on how much you enjoy Battlestar Galactica as a license, but for what it's worth this is also a really good tactical fleet combat game. In essence, you control a small flotilla of ships that can range from small corvettes to Jupiter-class battlestars like the Galactica. It's got a great single-player campaign with challenging resource and political management, and the tactical engine itself is superb. There are also skirmish options against the AI, and online multiplayer. There's also lots of DLC available to boot. NORTHGARD. This is a very cool RTS that's recently made the jump to consoles, as well as the Nintendo Switch. It's a curious blend of things like Tropico, or perhaps Stronghold, and Warcraft, with the principal mechanic a kind of guided control automation. You have villagers, and you can assign villagers to different buildings for specific jobs. Those newly kitted out villagers will generally start doing their job automatically. It's not quite as harsh as games like Majesty, where you can't give any direction to your units, only incentives. You can click on any villager and send them to a specific place, but you don't assign actions to them directly by and large. Each game of NORTHGARD is set on an island that you must slowly explore and expand into, clearing out hazards and eventually running into other players. There's been loads of free updates, and new modes added for free, with DLC coming in the form of new clans. ANCESTOR'S Legacy. This game is very underrated, but it's also quite niche in what it offers. You could almost call it a Dark Age Company of Heroes, in that it's a tactical-focused game with army units in an RTS environment. Several factions are represented, such as Saxons and Franks, and the solo campaign is actually pretty decent, especially the one in the Crusades-themed DLC. They are billions. While the overwhelming zombie subgenre may have reached its sell-by date, there are still interesting games being produced in the niche. This one plays as a hybrid between tower defense or old-school Stronghold and real-time strategy, with forces you need to move and properly deploy in order to survive the effectively endless waves of zombies while building up your industry and support. It seems an odd choice for console interfaces, but there you go. ACHTUNG. Cthulhu Tactics. The default time period for most of the Cthulhu mythos literature has always been the 1920s, but ACT skips forward a couple of decades, placing us firmly in World War II and providing what is really more of a turn-based experience inspired by XCOM but with more focus on longer-term preservation of units. After all, these are people with wants, dreams, and often supernatural powers. While it's not necessarily canon Cthulhu, it's enough to jazz with. Phantom Doctrine. Also in the single man as unit turn-based world, being submerged into the field of modern spycraft hooks hard if you're of that bent. There is a considerable focus on stealth and cunning to hold off the inevitable detection by enemy forces before you can escape with your prize, and both gunplay and managing your base both feel weighty and meaningful. XCOM 2. It's just not a real roundup of strategy games on platforms if there is no XCOM. Luckily for us, here it is, available for console players to really sink their teeth into it and have one of the best, and occasionally most frustrating, TBS and TBT experiences available in the genre right now.